Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Kato and I am so happy to be back on the Syberia Designs YouTube channel today with this bright spring card. I'm going to be using some stamps, coordinating stencils, and a sentiment die from the latest Syberia Designs release. I love this beautiful spring garden stamp and stencil set. There is a coordinating die available as well. All of the products are available separately and I will link them all in the description below. Now I'm going to share you some tips and tricks to work with these layering stencils and the coordinating stamp. I am going to start with the very obvious first trick, and that is how to line up these stencils. Now on these stencils there are guidelines and there are also the numbers for the order the stencils are supposed to be used in. Although I usually don't really care about the order they're supposed to be used in, but I did follow it for today's video. They were in order in the packaging, so I used them in order. Now, as you can see, I'm using my Misti to line these up. I just butt them all up in the same corner. I work on a larger piece of cardstock, and it's very helpful for me. I also want to tell you my favorite thing to do with all stencils, but also layering stencils, and I think a lot of people forget to do it with layering stencils, and that is add your shading. Even with layering stencils, I think it adds a lot to your image or your final result if you use a few colors of ink, or if you intensify the ink on one side or on one particular piece of your project. Like here, this is one stencil layer and I am using 4 ink cubes for it. You absolutely don't have to have all of these inks. You can just change up your pressure, add a very light ink to the tips of the leaves and a very heavy amount of ink to the stems, which is what I do. So I am darkening up the leaves as you go more towards the stems. So if you want to add a lot of depth to your image, it is very easy to do that. Just add a little bit more ink or a little bit of darker ink to certain parts of your stencils. And don't be afraid to do that with layering stencils. I feel like a lot of people forget to do it, and it does take a little bit of extra time. This took me 20 minutes to ink all of these stencils up, which is a little bit ridiculous for 4 stencils, but I think it was worth it in the end. Even with these flowers, I am using some oranges and some pinks because I think that's an interesting colorway. You don't have to just use one color. I am also adding 2 shades of those colors on each stencil. So I darken it up a little bit for the base layer, and then for the shadow layer, which is the final one right now, I do add very intense color to certain parts of the stencil. And adding that extra shading on your own without just following the stencil layers is going to give your image a lot more depth and a lot more contrast. It's really going to bring this to life. Now you can stop there. It's a beautiful no-line coloring look, but there are some details on the stamp. There always are some details on the stamps that are not in the stencil. And to add those, but not add them in black or make it look like an outline image, I use one of the inks I have already used in my stenciling. I usually go for a mid-tone, not the darkest shade I used, and I just stamp it. So I did line up the stencil. I fiddled around with it a little bit. I lined it up with my stenciled image, and I am going to try to match the colors, or I try to stamp the green where I stenciled the green, and I'm going to try to stencil orange where I stamp orange where I stenciled orange. It's not a perfect match. I'm not that good at the whole mirror thing where the stamp is, and yeah, I'm not perfect at it, but you don't have to be. I even shifted my paper at some point. It is not a perfectly stamped image, but no one is going to notice. The recipient is not gonna email you and say, well, this card wasn't perfect, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just really, really fun to work with these stencils. And I think stencils are a great way to try new color combinations as well. This was by no means a new color combination for me. This is actually one that I'm very, very comfortable with. I use it a lot. But I think stencils are a great way to experiment with color because it's pretty quick to do instead of trying to paint this in some sort of risky colorway. I think stenciling is a great way to experiment. Now I'm using the Thanks or the large Thanks sentiment die. I cut that out of gold cardstock, gold glitter cardstock. And then I want to use a sub-sentiment and I'm going to stamp that straight onto my card. This sub-sentiment is from the Spring Garden stamp set as well. It's just sending hugs. And I am going to stamp that once I know the placement of that Thanks die, and I have already cut down my stenciled image. I just used a basic die for that, but you can just trim it down with your paper trimmer as well. I'm picking that up with my Misti. I am adding some nice anti-static powder tool because the ink does stay quite wet on this paper. Usually dye inks sink right into the paper, but this is very handy paper because the inks lay on top a little bit so they don't dry quickly. So you really want to make sure you have some anti-static powder because I want to emboss. I always want to emboss and add some nice glossy black sentiments. I'm going to heat set this. It's really quick to heat set, just 1 sentiment, and then I'm actually going to mask it off. I am just taking a really slim piece of, it's not masking tape, it's washi tape, and then I'm going to add some black splatter. And yes, that is pretty scary because I just spent about half an hour on this card at this point. The whole stamping and the stenciling, it took me half an hour to do, and I didn't want to mess it up, but I did want to add a little bit more to this card, so I chose some black splatter to that to add to it, and I really liked it. Now, I cut this panel down quite a bit, so there is a margin on my card, and I wanted some green to peek through. So I am using some apple cardstock from the stamp market. It's a beautiful bright green. I don't use a lot for greenery. Mostly I use my colored cardstock for die cutting. I don't use this one a lot because it's not a realistic greenery color at all. It is very, very bright, but for this card it was perfect. So it's just a really nice bright green for a frame around my card. I'm backing my stenciled panel with some cardboard because that gives nice sturdy dimension, and then I can glue this stacked sentiment die right on top. It's 2 layers of white cardstock and a layer of gold glitter cardstock. It takes a little bit of fiddling to get it right in the exact place I wanted it around that sub-sentiment, but once that's done, this card is all finished. I debated adding some gold embellishments, but I just didn't want to take anything away from that beautiful soft stenciling and those fun black splatters. I hope you liked the card and I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below because I would love to read them. And you can find all of the products that I used today in the description below where possible. I have used affiliate links so I get a small commission on this sale. If you want, you can also subscribe to the Syberia Designs YouTube channel for more inspiration with these beautiful products and for any news on upcoming releases as well. You can also subscribe to my channel that should be linked on top of this video right now. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you next time.